The guard didn't turn around. He read one moment. He was halfway down the long, sterile corridor. The next, he was back at the beginning, resuming his patrol in a perfectly smooth, physically impossible loop. The new inmate Elias, a historian who built his life on the unwavering line of causality, saw it happen. He felt a dizzying wave of vertigo, as if the world itself had just skipped a beat. An old prisoner with eyes like dusty clock faces, a man they called Elias, was tracing patterns in the grime on the floor. He didn't look up. Rule number 1. Historian Elias whispered, his voice dry as sand. Never be out of sync. The clock doesn't like it. The guard completed his patrol normally this time, oblivious. But Elias knew this prison didn't just hold your body in space. It held your soul in a moment. And that moment was starting to break. The Pendulum Penitentiary was a place of unnerving metronomic precision. Every meal, every lockdown, every light cycle occurred at the exact same microsecond. Every single day. The inmates were calm, almost sedated, their movements slow and deliberate, as if they were wading through thick, invisible honey. They were the synchronized Elias, whose life's work was documenting the chaotic, unpredictable flow of history, felt like he was losing his mind. He started timing the skips, the small, jarring rewinds and fast-forwards that only he seemed to notice. A dropped tray in the mess hall would suddenly be back on the table. A conversation would loop, the same 2 sentences repeated. These weren't just glitches. They were edits. Someone was revising the present. It's the Chronomancer, Elias explained, his voice a low hum. He keeps the clock. He keeps us all ticking. The Warden? Elias asked. Elias gave a slow, sad shake of his head. The Warden is just a man. The Chronomancer is the one who decides what time it is. Elias's obsession began. He needed to understand the mechanism of the clock. He needed to find its skip. He knew the answer wouldn't be in the prison's modern systems. This was a deeper, more fundamental magic. He used his knowledge of history to befriend the prison's archivist, gaining access to the original physical blueprints of the facility from over a century ago. In a hidden addendum, written in a chemical ink that only appeared under specific light, he found it the Chronomancer's private manifesto. The pages described a machine of impossible ambition. The pendulum wasn't a prison. It was a time machine. The Chronomancer, the prison's original architect, had built a stabilized temporal field to contain the inmates. But his true goal was never containment. It was revision. He was trying to generate enough temporal energy to make a single, monumental change to the past. The skips and loops Elias was witnessing were practice runs, the Chronomancer refining his control, learning to edit moments without shattering causality. But how was he powering it? Elias scrolled to the final, horrifying page. The prison didn't run on electricity. It ran on time itself. It was siphoning potential timelines from the inmates. It wasn't just stealing their present. It was consuming their futures, every choice they could have made, every life they could have lived, and converting it all into fuel. The inmates weren't just prisoners. They were batteries for a temporal cannon. The final entry was a date, a time, and a target. Final calibration. Complete target event. The bridge collapse, 1928 required energy threshold, all remaining inmate futures. Elias felt a surge of cold terror. The Chronomancer was trying to prevent a tragedy that killed his family a century ago. And the final jump, the one that would drain every inmate of their future and leave them as permanent, mindless parts of the clock, was scheduled for tonight. He wasn't just an inmate, he was the final charge. As if the thought had summoned him, the air in the archives grew cold. The lights flickered. A figure shimmered into existence before him, an old, tired man in an archaic warden's uniform. The Chronomancer, your future is particularly bright. Historia, the entity's voice echoed, sounding both ancient and right beside him. It will provide the final push I need. Elias ran, but the corridor outside stretched to an impossible length. Time itself was turning against him. He had to get to the heart of the clock, the central chamber where the Chronomancer's physical body was housed. He couldn't fight a being who could rewind his every move. He had to introduce a flaw in his logic. The Chronomancer's entire motivation, his entire machine, was built on a single, unwavering point in his own past, the tragic accident. His power came from having a stable timeline from which to launch his change. But what if that timeline was a lie? What if the accident he was trying to prevent never should have happened in the first place? Elias remembered something from the blueprints, a detail about the 1928 bridge. It wasn't just any bridge. It was the first project the Chronomancer, then a brilliant young engineer, had ever designed. He raced back to the archives. The Chronomancer's temporal projections trying to slow him, to trap him in loops of his own past. He ignored them. His mind focused. He found the original structural schematics for the bridge, stored right here in the prison's own historical records, and he saw it. A single, catastrophic flaw in the steel stress calculations. A tiny, fatal error made by a younger, arrogant man. The Chronomancer was the one who had caused the accident. He had one chance, a desperate, insane gambit. He didn't need to fight the Chronomancer. He just needed to show him the truth. He found a pneumatic tube system, an archaic message network still present in the old prison walls. He rolled up the flawed blueprint, placed it in a canister, and sent it on a direct course to the central chamber. He reached the heart of the clock, a vast, circular room filled with a giant, ticking orrery of brass and light. In the center the Chronomancer stood, his hands raised, drawing power from the very air. It is time, historian, the final moment is here. Just then, the pneumatic tube hissed open, and the canister clattered to the floor. The Chronomancer paused, curiosity overriding his power. He unrolled the blueprint. He stared at his own work, at his own fatal, youthful mistake, frozen in chimney. He saw the truth. The tragedy that had fueled his century-long obsession wasn't fate. It was his own fault. His entire motivation, his stable, tragic timeline, collapsed into a paradox. If he had known about the flaw, he would have fixed it. The accident would never have happened. His family would have lived. He would have never built this prison. His reason for being in this room, at this moment, was erased. The great clock shuddered. The ticking of the orrery became erratic, then stopped. The temporal field that held the prison together collapsed with a sound like shattering glass. The Chronomancer, now just a tired old man, looked at Elias, his eyes filled with a century of released grief. "What have you done?" he whispered, before fading into dust. Time, for the first time in a century, snapped back to a single, stable, linear path. The prison was no longer a time machine. It was just a normal, decaying old penitentiary. Elias stood in the silent, motionless chamber. He had saved everyone's future. But he was still a prisoner, trapped in a bleak, unmagical present. The only one who remembered the temporal war he had just won. The story of Elias is a chilling question about the weight of the past and the danger of trying to rewrite our own history. If this tale of a temporal prison captured your attention, please show your support by hitting that like button.